is that battleship you saw majestically moored in a museum's dry dock, its timbers whispering tales of Trafalgar and Jutland, truly forged from the same steel and sweat that once braved cannon fire and Atlantic gales? Or is it merely an exquisitely staged illusion, a cleverly crafted replica masquerading behind history's velvet curtain, designed not to preserve truth, but to perform nostalgia for crowds clutching ice cream and selfie sticks? The Royal Navy, that once unrivaled sovereign of the seven seas, whose white ensign fluttered above every ocean, and whose broadsides dictated the fate of empires, now glides through the modern age not as a fleet of fighting vessels, but as a spectral armada of memory, simultaneously authentic legend carved into national identity and disputed imitation, reconstructed by conservators, marketers and mythmakers who understand that heritage sells better when polished than when pitted with rust and regret. Visitors from Tokyo to Toronto flock by the thousands to stand upon the weathered decks of HMS Victory, Lord Nelson's immortal flagship, eager to touch the very planks where Britain's greatest admiral breathed his last. But how much of what their fingers graze, how much of the oak they lean against, how much of the brass they photograph gleaming under museum spotlights was genuinely present on that smoke-choked, blood-slicked day at Trafalgar in 1805, versus having been meticulously replaced, refinished or reimagined by 20th century carpenters armed with archival sketches and donor-funded budgets. Authenticity in naval heritage is not a clear channel marked by buoys and beacons, but a fog-shrouded sea where restored decks blend seamlessly with original beams, where cannons cast in Birmingham factories during the Edwardian era stand in for Napoleonic originals too brittle to display, and where reconstructed rigging, woven not by press gang sailors but by heritage volunteers using YouTube tutorials, creates an immersive experience so convincing that even seasoned maritime historians occasionally forget which knots are historically accurate and which were invented for visitor safety. Some vessels proudly labeled original in guidebooks and gift shop brochures are, in material truth, upwards of 90% rebuilt over centuries, plank by plank, beam by beam, nail by nail. Yet they retain the sacred designation of authentic, not because of their physical composition, but because of their unbroken lineage, their symbolic continuity, their emotional resonance with a public that prefers the poetry of preservation over the prose of replacement, clinging to the comforting fiction that walking her decks is time travel rather than theatrical set design. HMS Belfast, that stoic survivor of Arctic convoys and D-Day bombardments, permanently anchored on the Thames like a grey sentinel watching over London's financial heart, feels undeniably real to the schoolchildren who clamber up her ladders and the pensioners who trace her battle honours with trembling fingers, and she is, structurally speaking, the genuine article. But her mighty 6-inch guns, though capable of thunderous salvos, were never actually fired in anger during the Second World War, having spent the conflict mostly silent, calibrated and ready, turning her into less a weapon of war and more a monument to preparedness, a steel and iron what-if preserved in bureaucratic amber. Replica ships, from the painstakingly accurate masts replacing those lost to rot on the Cutty Sark, to full-scale mock-ups built for blockbuster films like Master and Commander, fool even the most discerning eyes with their obsessive fidelity to period detail, their hand-forged ironwork, their hemp ropes twisted just so, their paint mixed to match Admiralty specifications lost to time, making them not mere imitations, but near-perfect doppelgangers that challenge curators and conservators to define where reproduction ends and resurrection begins. The Royal Navy's contemporary identity, stripped of empire and global dominance, leans ever more heavily not on seaworthiness or strategic deterrence, but on symbolism, the potent, marketable aura of tradition, courage, and imperial grandeur. transforming active warships into floating museums before their keels even cool, and turning retired captains into brand ambassadors for rum and wristwatches, all while quietly acknowledging that the public's appetite is for pageantry, not patrol logs. Dry docks across Portsmouth, Plymouth and Chatham cradle not merely decommissioned hulls, but ghosts of geopolitical glory. Original frames preserved beneath layers of marine-grade varnish and OSHA-compliant handrails. Gun ports sealed not by enemy shot, but by health and safety regulations. Mess decks scrubbed free of the lice and lanolin that once defined life below decks. Each vessel a palimpsest where the past is visible only through the translucent veil of modern curation. Even Admiral Nelson's famed uniform, the one displayed beneath bulletproof glass in the National Maritime Museum, complete with the fatal hole stitched neatly by conservators, isn't the actual coat he wore when struck down by a French sharpshooter's ball. That garment, saturated with blood, sweat and the acrid residue of battle, is deemed too fragile, too chemically unstable, too emotionally volatile for public display, locked instead in climate-controlled darkness, where only gloves and microscopes may touch it, leaving visitors to venerate a stand-in while the true relic whispers unseen in archival exile. Authentic artifacts, the cracked telescope used at Copenhagen, the water-stained logbook from the Nile, the dented canteen from Zeebrugge, often languish in temperature-controlled vaults, accessible only to scholars with laminated credentials, while their vibrant, durable, photogenic replicas take center stage under dramatic lighting, surrounded by audio loops of crashing waves and shouted orders, engineered not for accuracy, but for awe, not for study, but for spectacle. The Victory's magnificent steering wheel, polished smooth by generations of tourist palms, convinced they're gripping the very spokes Nelson's hands once turned in desperation and triumph, is in fact a faithful 1920s replacement installed after the original splintered under decades of ceremonial use, humidity and souvenir hunting fingertips. A quiet deception maintained not out of malice, but necessity, because sometimes history must be sanded down to be safely touched. Naval museums, caught between the Scylla of scholarly rigor and the Charybdis of visitor engagement, walk a high-wire act without a net, preserve the uncomfortable, complex, often ugly truth of naval warfare, or craft an emotionally satisfying, Instagrammable, child-friendly experience that inspires donations and repeat visits. Almost invariably, they choose the latter, understanding that wonder pays the bills even when it blurs the facts. Replica cannons, cast from modern alloys and charged with blanks instead of grape shot, boom daily across historic quays for delighted crowds, their thunder echoing off gift shops and cafe terraces, while their authentic counterparts, weakened by centuries of salt corrosion and chemical decay, would likely fracture or recoil catastrophically under live fire, transforming educational demonstrations into emergency room case studies. Contemporary shipwrights, trained in ancient techniques passed down through guilds and apprenticeships, now labor with adzes and caulking irons to rebuild vessels plank by plank. Their craftsmanship so precise, their materials so carefully sourced, their finishes so artfully distressed that the resulting replicas achieve a kind of hyper-authenticity, more real in appearance than the crumbling originals they replace, raising the unsettling question of whether perfection in imitation negates the need for preservation of the imperfect original. But does technical mastery, however breathtaking, equate to historical authenticity? Philosophers in tweed jackets and curators in sensible shoes still debate this over lukewarm tea in museum staff rooms, torn between the materialist view that only original matter carries truth and the phenomenological argument that lived experience, emotional impact, and cultural memory constitute a deeper, more meaningful form of realness than mere molecules ever could. The Mary Rose, Henry VIII's pride and premature tragedy, raised from the Solent mud after 437 years of silence, is perhaps Britain's most scientifically significant maritime recovery. An unparalleled window into Tudor naval life, social hierarchy, and early gunnery tactics. And yet, shockingly, nearly 70% of what visitors see today is not 16th century oak, but 21st century reconstruction. Fiberglass ribs, epoxy resins, digitally modeled carvings, and speculative fittings based on fragmentary evidence, all assembled with forensic care, yet fundamentally imagined rather than inherited. Her skeletal frame is authentically Tudor, yes, gnarled, worm-eaten, stained with centuries of silt. But her skin, her musculature, her very posture as she stands in her climate-controlled hall are products of modern engineering, artistic interpretation, and educated guesswork, forcing us to confront the paradox that we call her real, not because of what she materially is, but because of what she spiritually represents. A direct line back to a king's ambition and a crew's final, desperate cries. Tour guides, trained to inspire rather than interrogate, rarely pause their stirring narratives to clarify which bulkhead is original and which was fabricated in a Devon workshop last winter. They understand that interrupting the magic with footnotes risks puncturing the balloon of historical immersion, and so they let awe override accuracy, allowing visitors to believe, if only for an hour, that they have stepped aboard a ship that sailed with Shakespeare's contemporaries. The Royal Navy, ever pragmatic in its stewardship of legacy, actively encourages this gentle ambiguity, not out of deceit, but out of deep institutional wisdom, recognizing that myth, properly managed, fuels national pride, tourism revenue, and recruitment brochures far more reliably than rusted iron, fragmented documents, or the uncomfortable truths of press gangs, floggings, and colonial exploitation ever could. At Portsmouth Historic Dockyard, where Victory, Warrior, and M33 lie in uneasy proximity, reality and replica coexist like officers and enlisted men sharing the same wardroom, physically adjacent, functionally intertwined, yet forever separated by invisible lines of provenance, privilege, and perception. Each vessel telling a different version of the same story, depending on which plaque you read or which audio guide you select. Even the paint colors swathing these venerable hulls, those rich ochres, deep blacks, and creamy whites evoking Georgian elegance, are largely approximations, educated reconstructions based on pigment analysis of microscopic flakes and Admiralty memos that never, of course, specified Pantone codes or UV resistance ratings, meaning every brushstroke applied today is as much an act of imagination as of restoration. Logbooks, those meticulous handwritten records of wind speed, latitude, and biscuit rations, can confirm with near certainty a ship's position during a battle or storm, but they remain stubbornly silent on whether the chipped teacup sitting in the captain's reconstructed cabin survived the voyage from Batavia, or whether it was lost to a rogue wave and replaced mid-ocean by a tin mug pilfered from the purser's stores. Many cabins presented as authentically furnished are in fact curated collages. The desk might be period-correct Portuguese mahogany salvaged from a Lisbon auction. The sextant, a genuine 1805 instrument recovered from a sunken frigate off Malta. The hammock hooks cast from molds of originals found in a Devon barn, but assembled together, they create a composite scene that never existed in any single moment, anywhere, for anyone, becoming dioramas of idealized history rather than snapshots of lived reality. Authenticity in this context becomes not a binary state, but a mosaic, a real iron nail driven in 1798 here, a copied signal flag stitched in 2012 there, a fragment of original caulking preserved under glass beside a fully reconstructed capstan, all stitched together by curators into a seamless, believable narrative that satisfies the eye, the mind, and the soul, even if it fractures under forensic scrutiny. HMS Warrior, Launched in 1860 as the world's first ocean-going iron-hulled warship and a terrifying symbol of British industrial might, today gleams under museum lights like a freshly minted coin, her rivets polished, her engines oiled, her decks swept clean of coal dust. But the reality of her service life was grimy, deafening, oil-slicked and claustrophobic. A floating factory of steam, sweat and sulfur, where men coughed black phlegm and wiped grease from their eyebrows with ragged sleeves, a truth sanitized away in favor of aesthetic grandeur. Restoration, by its very nature, sanitizes history. It scrubs away the lice that crawled in sailors' bedding, neutralizes the reek of bilge water and unwashed bodies. Sands smooth the bloodstains soaked into oak floorboards after amputations performed without anesthesia, replacing visceral horror with visual harmony, trading trauma for tranquility in the name of accessibility and audience comfort. Replica uniforms worn by costumed interpreters look crisp, colorful and camera-ready, pressed wool, gleaming buttons, perfectly knotted neckerchiefs. But the originals, issued to real sailors facing real typhoons and real enemy fire, reeked of sweat, salt, tar and gunpowder, disintegrated within months from constant wetness and abrasion, and were rarely washed, becoming stiff, stained second skins that itched, chafed and smelled like despair. Comfort sacrificed for survival, dignity surrendered to duty. Children, shrieking with delight as they command a real pirate ship at a seaside festival, have no idea that the vessel beneath their feet is a Hollywood-grade reproduction built in 2015 for a TV miniseries. Its cannons made of painted foam, its treasure plastic doubloons bought in bulk from Alibaba, its Jolly Roger stitched by a seamstress in Brighton. Yet their joy is no less real for being manufactured, their memories no less vivid for being staged. The Royal Navy licenses these replicas for films, commercials, corporate events, even nautical-themed weddings with cheerful pragmatism, understanding that blurring the line between entertainment and education serves a greater purpose. Keeping the flame of naval heritage alive in a culture increasingly indifferent to dusty archives and silent memorials, transforming passive observers into active participants, even if participation means posing for photos rather than studying tactics. On Replica Voyage, marketed as authentic tall ship experiences, GPS units blink reassuringly below decks, while passengers pretend to navigate by sextant and star chart. Authenticity is quietly sacrificed not out of laziness, but out of legal obligation. Insurance companies refuse to cover vessels relying solely on 18th century methods, and maritime authorities mandate electronic aids, turning romantic adventure into carefully managed simulation. Even the most passionate battle reenactments, complete with smoke machines, choreographed wounds, and booming blank charges, are sanitized theater. No one wants a genuine cannonball tearing through the crowd. No volunteer desires a real saber slash across the forearm. No parent approves of their child witnessing the true chaos, terror, and gore of wooden ship combat. So violence is stylized, danger defanged, death reduced to a dramatic collapse followed by a wink and a trip to the snack bar. Yet these staged spectacles, however historically compromised, reach audiences numbering in the tens of thousands annually. School groups, retirees, foreign tourists, who might otherwise never crack open a naval history book or visit a maritime archive, proving that emotional engagement, however artificially induced, often teaches more people more effectively than academic precision ever could. What is lost in factual purity, exact uniform shades, correct rope types, period-accurate swearing, is more than regained in public engagement, volunteer enthusiasm, media coverage, and, crucially, funding streams that keep museums solvent, conservators employed, and original artifacts protected from decay, demonstrating that sometimes bending the truth is the only way to save it. Museums admit in hushed tones during staff meetings and grant applications that without replicas, Many of their most iconic ships would be functionally invisible, too decayed to display safely, too fragile to illuminate, too dull or damaged to attract the Instagram generation, forcing them to choose between honest obscurity and profitable illusion, a moral dilemma resolved annually by budget spreadsheets and attendance statistics. Authentic anchors, pitted with centuries of corrosion and weighing several tons, sit in climate-controlled storage wrapped in anti-corrosion film, visited only by researchers with clipboards, while lightweight, visually identical replicas hang dramatically from bowsprit displays, perfectly positioned for sunset selfies and influencer reels, their chains gleaming under LED spotlights, their authenticity irrelevant next to their photogenic appeal. The public, bless them, rarely cares whether the rope coiled on deck is hand-twisted hemp, following 1740s Admiralty specifications, or synthetic polymer dyed to look aged, as long as it feels rough under their palms, smells faintly of salt, and looks convincingly old-timey in their vacation photos, satisfying the aesthetic itch for historical texture without demanding material pedigree. Curators, over pints in the staff pub after closing, will sometimes confess with weary smiles, if we told them everything was fake, they'd stop coming, and then we couldn't afford to preserve the real things hidden in the basement. It's a Faustian bargain written in grant proposals and gift shop receipts. HMS Caroline, the last surviving British warship from the Battle of Jutland, now permanently berthed in Belfast as a floating museum, retains an astonishing 95% of her original 1914 superstructure and hull plating, a miraculous survivor of scrap drives and neglect, but her once thundering Parsons turbines have been silent since 1924. Her boilers cold, her engine room a cathedral of stillness, raising the haunting question, does mechanical silence diminish her authenticity or sanctify it? Is a ship less real because her heart no longer beats with steam and coal? Or more sacred because she endures as a silent witness, a steel and wood reliquary holding the echoes of dreadnoughts and dead boys? The answer depends less on metallurgy and more on metaphysics. Replica figureheads, carved dragons, mermaids and lions with fresh gilt and glossy eyes, grin cheerfully from bowsprit posts, untouched by salt spray or cannon blast, while their authentic counterparts, rescued from wrecks or attics, bear faces eroded by wind and war, expressions softened into anonymity by centuries of elemental punishment, their missing noses and chipped teeth testaments to endurance rather than artistry. We, the modern audience, prefer our heroes and their ships, polished, heroic and photogenically intact, not pitted, scarred or sagging with the weight of literal and metaphorical rot. We want Nelson without gangrene, victory without dry rot, empire without atrocities, history as highlight reel, not autopsy report, authentic damage, dents from French roundshot, cracks from North Atlantic ice, scorch marks from misfired carronades, bloodstains from surgeons' tables, tell stories that no replica, however skillful, can replicate. Tales of terror, resilience, improvisation and loss, etched not in interpretive signage, but in tortured wood and tortured metal. Narratives whispered by scars rather than shouted by tour guides. But those imperfections, those honest wounds of time and trauma, frighten donors who write checks expecting gleaming exhibits, not decaying relics. They unsettle families seeking wholesome day trips, not visceral confrontations with mortality and suffering. They complicate marketing campaigns, selling fun for all ages, forcing museums to sand down the sharp edges of history until they gleam safely under glass. Conservation science, noble and necessary, walks a razor's edge. Stabilize without sterilizing, preserve without falsifying, protect without prettifying. Knowing that every drop of consolidant applied to rotten timber, every coat of UV filtering varnish brushed onto faded paint, every carbon fiber rod inserted to support a sagging beam, moves the artifact further from its raw, ragged past and closer to a curated, consumable present. Laser scans now map every bolt, beam and breech loading mechanism with sub-millimeter precision, creating digital twins so exhaustive, so interactive, so perpetually accessible that they arguably become more real to future generations than the physical originals. Fragile, fading, fenced off ever could, turning silicon and code into the ultimate preservers of heritage. Virtual reality tours let you walk decks that rotted away in 1923, climb masts dismantled in 1947, fire cannons melted down for scrap in 1951, offering an authentic sensory and emotional experience within an entirely artificial environment, challenging the very definition of presence, embodiment, and historical encounter in the digital age. Is virtual authenticity, immersive, interactive, emotionally resonant, still authenticity? Or is it merely sophisticated simulation dressed in scholarly robes? The Royal Navy, ever adaptive, hasn't issued an official doctrinal memo yet. Schoolchildren proudly write essays about touching Nelson's ship, describing the grain of the wood and the chill of the metal, never realizing their small fingers grazed 21st century pine stained to resemble 18th century oak. Their historical encounter, carefully stage-managed by conservators who prioritize tactile safety over temporal fidelity. The Victory's quarterdeck, the sacred spot where Nelson collapsed into Hardy's arms, murmuring of Emma and duty, is marked today by a discreet brass plaque. Installed in 1928 during a major restoration, its placement based on conflicting eyewitness accounts and Admiralty guesswork, meaning visitors weep over coordinates that may be meters off target, their authentic emotion mapped onto inauthentic geography, and no institution dares correct them. Authentic emotion, grief for fallen heroes, awe at human endurance, pride in national legacy meets meticulously reconstructed, historically approximate geography on that quarterdeck, and the collision produces something powerful, resonant, and culturally vital, even if not empirically precise. Curators understand that tears shed over a misplaced plaque still water the roots of collective memory, and so they let the myth breathe uncorrected. Replica ships, gleaming Cutty Sark clones in Sydney, fiberglass Victory lookalikes in San Diego, ironclad simulacra in Yokohama, sail global festivals under Union Jacks stitched last Tuesday in Guangdong factories, drawing cheers from crowds who believe they're witnessing fragments of British naval glory, unaware that what they applaud is not heritage preserved, but heritage performed. A traveling roadshow of maritime nostalgia licensed, branded and monetized by heritage trusts who know a good story travels farther than a true one. Global audiences, from Osaka to Orlando, rise to their feet, waving plastic flags and snapping photos with costumed sailors, utterly unaware they're applauding fiberglass dressed as frigates, polyester posing as press-ganged wool, LED lanterns mimicking whale oil glow. A willing suspension of disbelief so complete, it borders on devotional, proving that emotional truth often outweighs material fact in the theater of public history. The Cutty Sark, though ravaged by fire in 2007 and rebuilt with more steel and epoxy than T-Clipper purists care to admit, remains London's darling. Her silhouette instantly recognizable, her story endlessly retold. Not because she is materially authentic, she barely resembles her 1869 self, but because she feels real. Her lines are elegant, her restoration narrative heroic, her presence on the Greenwich skyline a stubborn thumb in the eye of time and decay. Authenticity, we are slowly learning, isn't measured in growth rings of timber or chemical composition of paint pigments. It's measured in goosebumps, in held breath, in the lump that rises in the throat when a bugle plays the last post beside a silent gun, in the child who whispers, "Did people really live like this?" Responses triggered as reliably by skillful replicas as by crumbling originals, perhaps even more so when the replica removes distractions of decay and discomfort. Historians may groan into their tweed elbow patches about Disneyfication and heritage light, but psychologists nod sagely. Human memory is not a hard drive recording facts. It's a loom weaving emotion, sensation, and narrative into tapestries that feel true even when their threads are dyed with fiction. Belief, once internalized, reshapes memory more powerfully than any archival document ever could. The Royal Navy, institutionally brilliant at managing its own legend, knows this deep in its salt-stained bones, and markets nostalgia like a seasoned Commodore commanding a fleet of gift shops, VR experiences, and sponsored reenactments, understanding that the currency of the 21st century isn't broadsides or blockades, but brand loyalty, social media shares, and experiential tourism dollars. Gift shops across dockyards sell authentic sailor's soap, individually wrapped bars scented with lavender and bergamot, stamped with HMS logos, made in climate-controlled factories in Shenzhen. Nothing whatsoever like the tallow and wood ash lye cakes issued to real sailors, which smelled of rancid fat, dissolved in seawater, and left skin raw and stinging. Yet tourists buy them happily, carrying home not hygiene, but imagined authenticity, a tactile souvenir of hardship never endured. Yet this commerce is not cynical. It is symbiotic. Every bar of lavender soap funds conservation of real artifacts. Every plastic cutlass purchased by a toddler subsidizes laser scanning of original rigging plans. Every ticket to a pyrotechnic battle show pays the salary of the archivist digitizing logbooks in a windowless basement, turning consumerism into custodianship, capitalism into cultural preservation. Documentaries aired on BBC and Netflix showcase meticulously restored interiors of famous warships with sweeping crane shots, dramatic slow motion, and haunting orchestral scores, but quietly omit that restored often means completely reinvented, based on 3 surviving buttons and a diary entry, transforming educated guesswork into cinematic certainty, blurring the line between scholarship and storytelling until only credits distinguish them. Archival footage, where it exists, is now routinely colorized using AI trained on fabric swatches and paint chips, sped up or slowed down for dramatic pacing, scored with thunderous percussion and swelling strings, all to maximize emotional impact, minimize historical friction, and compete for attention spans raised on TikTok, turning primary sources into premium content optimized for binge watching rather than critical analysis. Even official Royal Navy records, logbooks, muster rolls, Admiralty dispatches are not pristine vessels of truth but leaky boats carrying cargo of errors, omissions, propaganda, and bureaucratic self-justification. Clerks' misspelled names, captains' exaggerated victories, supply officers' fudged inventories, meaning the very documents conservators use to authenticate replicas are themselves often unreliable narrators. So what baseline then defines authentic? Consensus, emotion, institutional decree. Replica ships, paradoxically, sometimes outlive their originals, built with modern materials resistant to rot and rust, maintained by full-time staff instead of pressed crews, never sent into battle or storm. They endure as pristine exemplars while their authentic counterparts disintegrate in dry docks or lie broken on ocean floors, raising the uncomfortable irony that fakes, shielded from history's violence, become its most durable monuments. Irony thickens like bilge water. The replicas, born of artifice, outlast the truths they imitate. The simulations become the survivors, The stage props inherit the earth while the sacred relics return to dust. A reversal worthy of Shakespeare or Borges, reminding us that endurance is not virtue, and longevity does not confer legitimacy. HMS Trincomalee, launched in 1817 in Bombay from teak that outlasted empires, is today the oldest British warship still floating. A miracle of tropical hardwood and imperial logistics, but she barely resembles her launch day self. Decks replaced, guns removed, cabins subdivided, engines retrofitted, her identity preserved not in unchanged matter, but in unbroken existence, a vessel defined by continuity rather than composition. Her authenticity, therefore, lies not in original bolts or untouched planks, for there are few, but in her persistent presence, her refusal to vanish, her endurance as a named, documented, sailed-upon entity across 2 centuries of technological and political upheaval, making her less a static artifact and more a living chronicle written in wood and salt. Like the ship of Theseus, replaced plank by plank until no original timber remained, the Royal Navy's historic vessels force us to confront the ancient, philosophical enigma. If every component is renewed, is it still the same ship? Is identity anchored in material or in memory, in molecules or in meaning? Do we venerate the object or the idea it carries? Philosophers shrug, publish papers in obscure journals, and sip Earl Grey in Oxford quadrangles. Museum directors, meanwhile, cash checks from school groups and foreign tour operators, understanding that metaphysical debates don't pay for humidity control systems or wheelchair-accessible gangways, and that sometimes pragmatism must pilot the ship while theory swabs the deck. Replica cannons cast affordably in regional foundries for $5,000 apiece, boom safely for birthday parties and corporate retreats, restoring an original 18-pounder to firing condition. That costs $50,000 minimum, and even then, metallurgists warn stress fractures could send shrapnel into the crowd, turning Heritage Day into a coroner's inquest, proving that budgets, insurance policies, and liability waivers dictate authenticity far more often than ethics or epistemology ever do. Budgets, bluntly, are the silent admirals of modern museology. They decide which cannon gets conserved, which deck gets relayed, which uniform gets replicated, which story gets told. And since donors prefer shiny exhibits to scholarly footnotes, the gilded replica usually wins the commission over the corroded original, no matter how historically significant the latter might be. Volunteers, young and old, tattooed and tweeded, spend weekends sanding replica bulkheads, stitching replica hammocks, singing sea shanties aboard replica forecastles, their passion burning bright as the noon sun on polished brass. Their dedication is utterly authentic, their knowledge often encyclopedic, their love for naval history profound, even if their tricorn hats were drop-shipped from eBay and their vintage tankards bear hidden "Made in Vietnam" stamps. The Royal Navy doesn't correct these devoted amateurs. It commissions them, applauds them, gives them badges and photo ops with admirals, understanding that living history needs living participants more than it needs material purists. That a volunteer who believes in the myth becomes a better ambassador than a scholar who deconstructs it, because wonder recruits where cynicism repels. Academic journals publish dense, peer-reviewed treatises dissecting the material authenticity of rope fibers and paint binders. Simultaneously, TikTok influencers post 30-second dance challenges atop gun decks, set to remixes of sea shanties, viewed by millions who will never read a footnote. Guess which medium shapes public perception, drives tourism, and secures future funding? The answer is written in analytics dashboards and quarterly attendance reports. Crowds don't queue for hours beneath summer suns to scrutinize chromatography reports on pigment degradation or debate dendrochronology timelines. They come for photo ops framed by towering masts, for ice cream cones eaten beside silent guns, for the smell of the sea, real or piped in, for the thrill of standing where heroes stood, regardless of whether those planks are original or convincingly distressed plywood. And if that sea smell, brine, tar and distant fish, is actually pumped through hidden vents from aerosol canisters calibrated to nautical nostalgia number 5? Well, suspension of disbelief is part of the ticket price, as essential to the experience as the audio guide headset or the mandatory safety briefing. We pay to be transported, not to be fact-checked. Authentic letters from real sailors, ink-faded, paper brittle, speak not of glory, but of terror, not of adventure, but of boredom, not of noble sacrifice, but of lice, loneliness, spoiled rations, and the gnawing fear of never seeing home again. Replicas, by contrast, sanitize these raw testimonies into uplifting narratives of courage and camaraderie, turning trauma into trope, pain into pageantry, because unvarnished truth rarely sells postcards. Reality was brutal, monotonous, often pointless. Weeks of chasing horizon lines, months without women or wine, years without promotion or pay. Replicas offer romance, heroism, clear villains and clearer victories because we soften history to digest it, sugarcoat the cannon smoke, filter out the dysentery, turning survival into saga, endurance into epic. Which version serves history better? The unflinching record of suffering and systemic cruelty, or the inspiring myth that motivates children to study navigation, veterans to share stories, nations to fund museums? The answer depends entirely on whether you ask a trauma historian or a tourism minister, and both, tragically, are right. The Royal Navy's own website, in carefully vetted prose, refers to certain flagship exhibits as faithful reconstructions informed by cutting-edge research, corporate euphemism for mostly made up based on best guesses and donor expectations, acknowledging artifice while cloaking it in the respectable robes of scholarship because direct honesty might scare off the very audiences needed to sustain the enterprise. But footnotes don't sell tickets, endow chairs, or trend on Instagram. Drama does. Drama of last stands and daring rescues, of flags defiantly raised amid smoke, of admirals dying in the arms of loyal friends. So the Navy gives the people what they crave. Not ambiguity, but apotheosis. Not complexity, but catharsis. Even royal visits to historic ships, those photo-ready moments of princes in peacoats shaking hands with veterans, are meticulously staged. Ropes tightened overnight, decks power-washed at dawn, crew positions rehearsed like West End actors, speeches timed to avoid tide-induced listing, all to project seamless continuity between Crown and Navy, past and present, myth and monarchy, with spontaneity as carefully excluded as seagulls from the quarterdeck. Authentic spontaneity, the sudden squall, the misfired salute, the candid remark caught on mic, is reserved for Netflix docudramas and reality TV. Real heritage management runs on spreadsheets, risk assessments, and PR playbooks, where even the Queen's smile is positioned for optimal lens angle and brand alignment. Behind velvet ropes and do not touch signs lie fragments so fragile that light itself is treated as an enemy. Parchment that crumbles at a whisper, silk uniforms that disintegrate under UV rays, wooden carvings that crack if humidity dips below 45%. Yet their vibrant, indestructible replicas bask all day in the glare of smartphone flashes and selfie sticks, adored by crowds who would never notice the difference, nor care to. Conservation versus accessibility, the eternal tug-of-war in every museum, every archive, every heritage site. Do you lock away the truth to preserve it, or display a facsimile to disseminate it? Do you serve the artifact, or the audience, the scholar, or the schoolchild? There is no perfect answer, only compromises written in loan agreements and grant renewals. The Victory's surgeon's tools, bone saws, artery forceps, bullet probes, displayed in glass cases with clinical precision, are chillingly authentic, their edges still sharp enough to make visitors flinch. The bloodstains, however, are conspicuously absent, not scrubbed away, but never applied because no curator dares simulate the gore of pre-anesthetic amputations for families with young children, turning medical horror into sterile curiosity. Replica battlefield amputations, choreographed with fake limbs, ketchup blood, and stoic actor surgeons, draw gasps and nervous laughter from crowds. Real ones, performed aboard rolling decks by candlelight with rum as anesthesia, drew screams, prayers, and rarely survivors, a truth too visceral for modern sensibilities, too ethically fraught for family entertainment. We soften history to digest it, not out of cowardice, but out of compassion. We sugarcoat the cannon smoke, blur the bayonet thrusts, mute the cries of the dying, not to deceive, but to invite. Because unmediated truth repels, where curated narrative inspires. And inspiration, however imperfect, is the engine of education, empathy, and preservation. Perhaps authenticity isn't housed in objects at all, but lives in stories told around campfires and classroom desks, in lessons learned from failure as much as victory, in respect paid silently before memorial plaques listing names no one remembers, but whose sacrifice we vow annually never to forget, even as we walk past replicas and never question their provenance. A child tracing the curve of a replica cannon learns ballistics, physics, history. Touching an original, half-eaten by rust, might teach only decay, entropy, loss. Both lessons have value, but only one ends with wide eyes and a begged-for bedtime story about pirates and admirals. Museums choose wonder because wonder seeds lifelong curiosity. The Royal Navy's enduring enigma isn't whether its museum ships are materially real. It's why we, the public, demand that they be. Why we insist on touching Nelson's deck even when told it's pine from B&Q. Why we need the myth to feel tangible, graspable, photographable, as if physical contact validates emotional connection, as if authenticity of object guarantees authenticity of experience. Do we seek empirical truth, or the comfort of myth wrapped in oak and iron, varnished with nostalgia, secured with museum-grade acrylic? Are we pilgrims to history, or tourists in its theme park? The answer shifts with the tide, depending on whether we hold a textbook or an ice cream cone. Museums aren't temples of immutable fact. They're theaters of negotiated meaning, stages where curators, conservators, marketers, and visitors co-author a collective story that feels true enough to move us, teach us, and, crucially, fund the next act, ensuring the lights stay on and the relics, real or reproduced, remain within reach. And in that theater, replicas don't merely fill in for missing pieces. They play lead roles, commanding standing ovations, starring in documentaries, gracing postage stamps, becoming through sheer repetition and emotional resonance more real in the public imagination than the fragmented, fading originals ever were. So next time you board a historic warship, pause before snapping your selfie. Does it truly matter if the wood beneath your feet sprouted in the 1700s or was kiln-dried last winter? If the story it tells, the courage, the innovation, the sacrifice, the folly, moves you, changes you, makes you look at the horizon differently, the Royal Navy's legacy sails on, not in untouched timber or unoxidized iron, but in stirred hearts, in widened eyes, in whispered questions from children to grandparents, in donations slipped into boxes labeled Preservation Fund, in the quiet awe of standing where history felt real, regardless of whether it technically was, authentic or replica. Maybe the question itself is the relic, an artifact of a bygone era when material purity mattered more than emotional impact, when provenance trumped participation, when history was kept behind glass rather than handed to visitors to hold, hug, and hashtag. What endures, ultimately, isn't the object, be it worm-eaten timber or flawless fiberglass, but the awe it inspires, the conversations it starts, the values it reflects back at us. Resilience, ingenuity, hubris, humility, the terrible beauty of humans pushing wooden walls across oceans in pursuit of power, profit, or principle. And in that awe, whether born of forensic authenticity or theatrical artifice, whether sparked by a genuine cannonball dent or a skillfully airbrushed imitation, the Royal Navy still rules, not the waves, but the imagination, not the globe, but the gallery of collective memory, where every visitor becomes for a moment part of the crew. Let the philosophers argue ontology. Let the conservators debate resin formulations. Let the accountants tally ticket sales. None of that diminishes the lump in the throat when taps echoes across a silent dock. None erases the child's whispered, "Wow." As a tall ship's sails catch the wind, none invalidates the veteran's tear as he salutes a flag that flew long after his service ended. For in those moments, manufactured or not, replicated or real, the spirit of the Royal Navy lives, breathes, and sails on, not in oak or iron, but in us.